Tov. Today's daf yomi is Bava Metzia Nun Aleph, Bava Metzia 51. Today's daf is dedicated for a Shmira for Am Yisrael, Shmira for the Chayalim, Yeshua for Am Yisrael, Atzalah for the Shvuyim. So the Mishnah had stated we're going to start on Nun Amar Beis, 4 lines in the bottom. The Mishnah had stated, since we're talking about Onah, price fraud, that you can go back and claim it was price fraud. Dispute between the Rabbanan who say until the time you show it to your friends or relatives, or Tarfon says you have all day. So comes along Rav Nachman, he says, Lo Shanu, when do we say this din? El Lokeach, only with respect to the purchaser. Aval Mocher, but the seller will owe him choser. He doesn't have this limitation, this time limitation. He's always allowed to go back on it. Name a Messiah, let's say that we have perhaps support for this position of Rav Nachman, name Messiah, because it says in the Mishnah that when the Tagrei wood, when the merchants of wood heard that Rabbi Tarfon, even though he had given them a larger margin, he said price fraud only kicks in at 1/3, which was better for them. But nevertheless, he gave them the whole day. He said that you have the whole day to go back. So when they heard this, they went back to the position of the Chacham and said that you only have the time until you show it to your relatives or the merchants who are with you. Now, if you want to say that the seller can always go back, like Rav Nachman said, that's why it makes sense that they went back to the position of Chachamim, because they could always go back. But if you want to say that the seller is like the purchaser, and so if you want to say that they're like the purchaser, then why would they care if there's a limitation on when the purchaser if the time when the purchaser can claim fraud is extended? Why does that hurt them? What's good for the goose is good for the gander, just like the purchaser has more time. But the Rabbanan also gave them more time the whole day. But so therefore must be that proof for Rav Nachman that for the Chachamim they have the whole day. They have forever for the Chachamim, not just up until the whole day. And that's why they didn't like it. They're giving the purchaser more time when it doesn't affect them at all. So Gemara says, no, Tagrei wood will shliach the Torah. The Tagrei wood, the merchants of wood, they were sharp businessmen. They didn't typically make a mistake. They weren't the ones tricked. And so therefore, it didn't matter to them that if they would have the whole day. That didn't matter to them. So this is not necessarily for them to claim fraud. So this is not necessarily a proof for Rav Nachman. So now I'm going to tell us several more stories. The host of Rabbi Nachman, Zabin Chamra, he sold wine, but he undersold it. So he was Ashkechei Yatzif. So Rabbi Barchamas found his host was very upset. Why are you so sad? He said, I sold the wine and made a mistake. Go back and claim that you were that there was fraud. He said, I can't. I already waited too long to show it to a relative or a merchant. So Shadrai Kameh to Rav Nachman, so they sent him. So Rami Rachama told him, go ask Rav Nachman. Rav Nachman said, when did we say there's a limitation on when you could claim that you were cost money? Only by the merchant, only by the purchaser. But the seller will owe him choser. He's always able to go back. My timer. Now we explain the reasoning. Because the purchaser has the object he bought. Let's say he bought a watch. He has it in his hand. Wherever he goes, he shows it to people. And they say to him, everybody's going to give you their 2 cents. So you got a good deal, a bad deal. But the seller, he's not holding the object in his hand. He has to wait until he sees another object that's the same thing that he bought. Then I'll know if he made a mistake or not. So that's why Rav Nachman says that this limitation only applies to the purchaser, but not to the seller. Varshaki was the bune. So the guy was walking around selling like ribbons. Kari Shisa, he says, Vishavi Hamisha. He said he's selling it for 6, but really it was only worth 5. So he was doing fraud. And if they would give him 5.5, have a shekel, he would take it. Also, Gavra Amar. So a man came along and said, if I give him 5.5, well, then it's within the 1/6. So then it's a waiver. I'm going to give him the full 6. Then I'll take him to court. I'll claim it was fraud, and he'll give me back the whole 6, and not just, and I won't waive half of it, which is by paying more, I'll get the full amount returned to me. Also, coming to Rava, when it came to Rava, so this idea that avona is only when you purchase it from a merchant. But when you purchase it from somebody who's selling it like his own objects, then there's no ona there, and the distinction is because it's not a fixed price. It's because there it's all sentimental value. It's your own object. So, there was a man that was abune. Another story, he was holding rings to sell them. Karishis, and you're announcing he's selling it for 6. For Shavan Chamishin, it was really worth 5. And if you would have given him 5.5, 550, have a shakel, he would take it. Also, Gavra so the guy comes up with stable logic. If I give him 5.5, I'm waiving the extra payment. So Eten Leishis, and I'll give him 6. As by, so he says, I'll just give him the 6. I'll give him the 60, and then after I give him the 60. Then Esbailadina, I'll be able to take him to the court. Also, and I'll get the whole 10 back. Also, coming to Avchusta, the law of Anah doesn't apply if you buy it from like a Bava Metzia, from a regular person. It only applies to purchasing it from a merchant. So Amar Rav Dimi Yesher. Rav Dimi said this is correct. Yesher. Gemara says, what about the fact that the next mission is going to say just like there's enough for a regular person, there's enough for a merchant. And man, hedjo, when our mission says there's enough for a regular person, doesn't that mean a balabais? Isn't that what we call a balabais? No, so Amrav Chus, it depends what he's selling. Bitzadraisa, when we say there's enough for a balabais, when he's selling bitzadraisa, meaning to say these are a regular person, he's selling canvas garments. These are like ready to be sold. But money tashmi, or Rashi says kanavus, like maybe they made the garments out of hemp. Well, money tashmishte, but if it was garments that he himself was wearing, the Akiri that they were very dear to him, then he's not going to sell them. Then they're sentimental, so it'll sell for a lot more value, so there's no on that. So says the Mishnah, whether you're the purchaser, whether you're the seller, the law of Ona applies whether you're the purchaser or the seller. And the Shem Shono Hedjo, just like there's enough for a regular person, Kachono Tagar, so too there's enough for the merchant. Rabbi Yehuda Omar, Ein Ona Tagar. Rabbi Yehuda says there's no Ona for the merchant. We'll have to see why. Mishu Huto Olav, the one who was defrauded, Yato Al Yono, he has the upper hand. And therefore, Ratza Omar Oteli Ma'osai, Oteli Ma'ashani Sani. If he wants to, he could say, give me my money, i.e. cancel the sale, or give me the amount you defrauded me. So the Gemara says, what's the source for the idea that just like there's enough for the purchaser, there's also enough for the seller? The Tanur Rabbanim, so it says in the pasuk, when you sell something to your friend, do not defraud. This is clearly if the purchaser is being defrauded. This is not a mocher minayin. I don't know if the seller is being defrauded. Tam Omer o kano al tanu. So it says both the one who is purchasing and the one who and do not defraud. So it refers to both. The itzdrach l'miktav, and we needed to write lokeach itzdrach l'miktav mocher, and the pasuk needs to write the purchaser and the seller. Because the Rahman mocher. If the Torah only told us about the seller, I would say mishum de kimwe bizabinte, that the reason why he can't defraud the purchaser is because the seller knows the price, and so therefore he's intentionally defrauding the other person of a lokech. But the purchaser, the lokim lebizabinte, he doesn't know, he didn't purchase it, he's not an expert on the price. Maybe the Torah is not warning him about defrauding the seller. Because the Torah only told us about the prohibition for the purchaser to defraud the seller, because he's the one purchasing. Damri inchi zabant kanit. Because people say if you sell something, you purchased it. Meaning to say, if you bought an object, that's a good thing. Basically you're the one who got the better deal if you're the one who's purchasing something. But a seller, he's losing something. The Amri Inchi Zab and Ovid, you sell something, you're losing. Meaning say you always want to be the buyer. So therefore, the Torah didn't warn such a person below tono. So therefore, you need both cases. Tzricha. Rabbi Yehuda says, "Eino no atagar," that the merchant is not in the prohibition of ona. Why? Gemara says, "Mishum shu tagar eino ona," because he's a merchant, he doesn't have to worry about ona. Rav Nachman Amarav betagar safsar shana. So Gemara is going to say that Rav Nachman says we're talking about a merchant who's a middleman. My time I made the yadia the binte kamishavya. He knows all the prices, doing arbitrage. And so he waives his rights. There's a bana hachi, and the reason why he's purchasing it for more, mishum desramil is a binta achrite, because he had another sale waiting down the street. But now he wants to go back and get his money from the first guy, but the whole time he knowingly went into it because he had another deal down the street. Rav Ashi says, no, my ain latagar ona. What does it mean that you don't have, there's no ona on the merchant? Aino b'toras ona. It means just the opposite, that he's now under the laws of ona, which are 1/6. Shafilu pachas michte ona. Even if it would be less than a 6 choser. Why? Rashi says, because his whole livelihood is dependent upon it. So they established the law that if you steal or if you defraud, price fraud on the seller, even any amount, according to Rabbi Yehuda, you could go back because his whole livelihood is dependent on it. Tanya Kavasi de Rav Nachman, we have a price like Rav Nachman. Rabbi Yehuda says Tagar Engel of Abnav Neshu Baki. And it's another expert. This follows the position of Rav Nachman. That what's the reason why there's no no on the Tagar? Because he knows the prices. He's an expert. So clearly, if he bought it for more, it's because he has something else in the pan that he's working on. Somebody who was defrauded, he has the upper hand. If he wants to, he could say, "Give me my money," or if he wants to, he could say, "Give me the fraud back." You could cancel the sale, give me the fraud back. So money must nisin. So the Gemara says, well, who's our Mishnah like? Our Mishnah is not like Rabbi Meir, it's not like Rabbi Nassin, and it's not like Rabbi Huda Nasi. Rabbi Nassin, if you want to say it's like Rabbi Nassin, mas nisin katani ratza. Our Mishnah says here, if he wants to, he could cancel it. That's what our Mishnah says. Mas nisin katani Ratza, that he has the upper hand, and Bryce said the Rabbi Nassan, but the Bryce of Rabbi Nassan, lo katani Ratza. It says that it doesn't say the word Ratza, that it's a valid sale. He just has to return the ona. So our Mishnah is not like Rabbi Nassan. And Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi, if you want to say it's Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi, masnisin katani lokech. Our Mishnah says that where the purchaser was defrauded, he has the upper hand because he could say, "Give me back my money that I gave you," or he could say, "Give me the part that you defrauded me." Whereas but the Brisa talks about a seller because, as Rashi says, we're talking about a case where the seller was defrauded; he has the upper hand. But if it was the purchaser who was defrauded, it's a valid sale. It doesn't talk about that. It doesn't mention about where the purchaser was defrauded. So the Gemara says, three answers. Amar Rabbi Lazar, Ona zu eni yodea mishana. So he says, first answer, Rabbi Lazar says, I don't know who taught this Mishnah. It must be a third opinion. Second answer, Rabbi says, Olam Rabbi Nasani. Our Mishnah is Rabbi Nasan. The Tani Nami, Brisa Ratza. And you have to amend the text of the Brisa to add in the word Ratza. Rabbi says, Olam Rabbi Yehuda Nasi. Third answer, Rabbi says that really our Mishnah is Rabbi Yehuda Nasi. My the Shai Ramas Nisan from the first Brisa, and they're complementing each other. The Mishnah and the Brisa filling each other. Amar Avashi Dekanami, we could also infer like the third approach that our Mishnah is referring to the seller, and so that's what's going on. That like the third answer, because the reason why we know this is because we learned in the first part of the Mishnah, and so it's referring to both. And in the Seifa, it says, it only explains the position of the purchaser. We see from here, it's obviously the case. It's also referring to the seller as well. Somebody says to his friend, I'm selling this to you on the condition that you won't be able to make a claim of ona against me. Ona is, you can't come back to me and say you tricked me, there's price fraud. So let's say he wants to say that at the beginning. Rav Amar Yesh lo lav ona. Rav says, no, the laws of ona still apply. Shmuel says, Ein lo lav ona. Shmuel says the laws of ona do not apply. That you're allowed to say this, you're allowed to make this condition. So do you want to say that this relates to a sugya we have throughout the shots about whether or not you can be masna or mashakos of the Torah? You can make a stipulation against the Torah. Torah says there's price fraud. And here you're saying I'm selling to you on the condition that laws of price fraud don't apply. So Rav says you can't do that. You can't stipulate against Torah. And Shmuel says you can. Rav Damar Rabbi Meir. You want to say that Rav holds like Rabbi Meir, who says that you can't be masna mashakos of the Torah. You can't make a condition against the Torah. And Shmuel Damar Rabbi Hudu says you can. The Tanya, like we learned in the Brisa, let's say a man wants to marry a woman on the condition the condition, I don't have to support you, I don't have to give you food, I don't have to give you clothing, and I don't have to be intimate with you. So if he says on the condition that I don't have to do any of these things, she's still betrothed to no batal. And the condition is canceled. That's Rabbi Meir. You can't be Masa Mashakas Torah. It seems to be like Rav. Whereas Rabbi Yehuda says, B'darash Mamon to know Kayam, that if the monetary things, the condition is upheld, that you can be Masa Mashakas Torah. So Amrocha Rav will say, no, Ana da Amri, I feel Rabbi Yehuda. I can even hold like Rabbi Yehuda, who says the condition is upheld. Adkan will come Rabbi Yehuda awesome. Why does Rabbi Yehuda say the law by the case of a woman that you can be masked and say, I'm marrying you on the condition I don't have to support you? Because there he says it to Yadav Kamalcha, because she knows what's at stake and she's waiving it. She says, listen, I don't need your support. I have my trust fund. I don't need your support. Avohacha on the top of Nunal from a base, mi Yada Demakil. In this case, how does this person that Rav says, he said, I'm selling to you on the condition that there's no ona, but he doesn't know what the price is, so he doesn't know enough to waive it. Ushmuel Amar on the Amri Afil Rav Meir, Shmuel, who says that in this case, the sale is valid and there's no ona. He could even say like Rav Meir says, you can't be Masa Masha Kasabatar. Why? On top of Nudal from Bezad Kan, who come Rav Meir Hasam El Devade Ka'akar. Only in that case does Rav Meir say that you can't make a condition against the Torah because you're for sure uprooting the laws of the Torah there about Sheiro Ksusa, about food and clothing. But here you're not necessarily, you're just trying to provide insurance. You're not necessarily uprooting what's written in the Torah. So Ravanan says the position, it was literally explained to me the position of Shmuel. Says, I learned these laws specifically from Shmuel. And what did he say? He says, he says, if he would say, I'm selling this to you on the condition that you can't claim ona against me, well, then you can't claim ona. But if you say, Amanashe ain't bo ona, but if you say on the condition that there is no ona there, hare yesh bo ona. So it depends. If you stipulate you can't make a claim against ona, then indeed you can't make it. But if you say that there is no ona, but then there was ona, so then he could make an ona claim. So Mesave, we're going to challenge this case from a brisa. The brisa says, "Anosin va'anosin ba'amana." What's amana? So he says, amana. Rashi explains is you sell this for whatever you're able to get, and then you're going to have to give me the money at a specific time. Meaning, say, I'm giving you my apples. You sell my 100 apples. I don't care how much you get, but at the end of the day, you're going to give me $30, no matter how much. And I'm going to rely upon you, and I'm basically giving you uh, um, your payment, your wages, regardless of what you sell it for. Anosim v'anosim ba'amana va'omer lechavero. So the first part, the amana case, is not really relevant because it's the second case. Va'omer lechavero menashe ein chol ayona. I'm selling this to you on the condition you can't make an onah claim against me. Ein lo avona. Then you can't make an onah claim against him. So with Rav the Amar on a Damri Afila Rabbi Yehuda, according to Rav, it says there even Rabbi Yehuda would say that in this case it's not valid because he doesn't know that he's waiving. So according to Rav Hamani, so who would Rabbi Yehuda say this is like? I'm Rabbi Mechavarte Rav Amar Rabbi Meir Shmuel Amar Rabbi Yehuda. So Rav said, so therefore Rabbi says you have to say that Rav only holds like Rabbi Meir and Shmuel holds like Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi says no, Akasha Kamba Stam Kamba Mefarish. No, it depends whether or not you're stam, where you say on the condition that, like we explained before, the position of Shmuel, on the condition that you don't have any ona against me. So then she doesn't know, then he doesn't know to waive it. But Mefarish, he says, I know that there's onah. I know explicitly there's onah, and I'm still selling it to you on the condition that you don't make this claim against onah, that there Rabbi Yehuda says the condition will be valid because there it's like Shero Ksusa. So that's how Rav explains it to be consistent with Rav. The Tanya, like we said in the Brisa, Bamedvar Mamurim, when do we say that the onah is not waived and it's still onah by a case of stam where you don't explicate it of mefarish, but where you're explicit, mocher she'amar lokeh chafetz shani mocher b'masayim yodea ani bo she'ino shavel amana. We say I'm selling you this watch for 200, but I know it's only worth 100. Almanah she'en chol onah, and you can't make a claim of onah. Ingo of onah. In that case, there's no claim of onah. Nachen lokeach. So to a purchaser, she'amar lamocher, who says to a seller, chafetz shani lokeach mimcha. The mana, this object that I'm purchasing from you for 100, Yodeani Bo, Sheshava Masayim, I know that it's worth 200. But you can't make a claim, then even Rabbi Yehuda would say, and even Rav would agree, in that case, you can't make a claim against Ona. So now we have the next case, which Rashi says that this is a case of Mersek Ribis. It looks like Ribis. So what's the case here? That somebody is basically giving the person his apples to sell, and he says, return me the money at this time, and I'm going to give you this. You sell them for whatever you want, however much you can sell the apples for, and I'm going to give you this amount of money. And it looks like basically like a little bit like interest. In this case, that if he's doing it like this, because what we're going on here is there's two types of sales. That one is he's doing straight out like that. The other one he's doing like a commission. So he can't say, well, I sold the bad apples on the amana, on the straight one, and the yafa with the commission. So Rashi explains what's going on here. He has two wines. That the good wine, everybody's going to want to buy it once, and the bad wine he has to sell at retail in the shop. Well, we can't say to him, he says he can't say to him, I'm going to give you the good wine at its value on the condition that you sell for me the bad wine in the shop for whatever you're able to. And when you sell them, give me the both on, give me the money for both of them. And he says, I'm not going, he says, the person who owned the wine exempts himself. He's trying to exempt himself from paying him by saying, look at the money that you have that I already gave you for the value of the good wine, and now I don't have to give you for the money for selling the bad wine. Vahavi ribis. It looks like interest. It's like ribis in that case. So you can't do it like that. Basically, you give him the money. He says, take the money that you got for selling the good wine, and in the meantime, you're going to sell the bad wine and pay yourself off from that because basically it's like interest. You either have to give him the money, basically a fixed price, or sell it off retail, and you're going to take the money. So that's how you have to do it. The no single schar kotef, and you could also give him the money for carrying it, and schar gamol for transporting it, and schar pundak for storing it, and schar atmo in a hotel. But you can't give him. You don't give him the money for his own labor. That you don't give him. Shekvar nasal scharo mishalim. So because you already paid him in full. So Gemara says schar mishalim mehecha kayav. Where did you give that to him? So Amar Papa. Bit sadruye by we were talking about people who are selling canvas garments. The Yahavi Arbalamea. Basically, you give him a certain amount of the garments at the beginning that is going to be his share. Okay, so that is today's Daf Yomi, and God willing, we'll continue. We'll continue. But in the meantime, we want to wish everybody good Shabbos, and